So I'm back with the construction tutorial for my Simple Stories, Simple Vintage, Great Escape album. And this is what we're going to end up with when we're done. But first we need to construct it, so let's get started. So I will put at the very top or down in the comments the cutting guide for this album. So hopefully you can print it off and follow along as we're creating. So we're going to need a couple of chipboard pieces to get us started. We need the front and back covers that measure 6.5 by 8.5, and we need a spine piece that measures 2.25 by 8.5. So we're going to start with our spine piece. And for that, we need a piece of cardstock that's going to measure 5.25 by 10.5. We are going to put our piece of cardstock on the left-hand side of our scoreboard, and then we're going to get our spacers out. So this is my 1-inch spacer that I use when I'm going to cover the actual front and back cover, but we need the 1 inch along the top to cover our spine. But down the bottom, we need 1.5 inches. So let's get the score tape off the back. And remember to burnish your score tape before you start removing the backing from it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our spine piece and we're going to butt it up against this spacer at the top and butt it up against the spacer that's on the left-hand side. And then we're going to lay it flat, remove our spacers. We're going to flip it over and burnish the back. And then we're going to do some folding. And I like to fold my top and bottoms first. And what I'm doing is, this is the edge of my chipboard. I am making it help me fold the paper. So we are folding right along the edge of that chipboard. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on this as I'm folding it over. And I'm using the Artisan Craft cardstock today. And I love this cardstock. If you've never tried it, please visit Country Craft Creations page and check it out. It is one of the few, probably the only cardstock I use that I can be pretty much guaranteed it is never going to crack. So we fold it over the top and bottom. Now we want to do the same process on the sides. And the other side. And like I say, when you make the chipboard work for you with the folding, you get these nice crisp score lines. Now, because this is our spine, and this are going to be our wings that we're going to be putting adhesive on, and it's going to help with the folding of the book, what I want to do is turn it over and fold it back on itself. And repeat on the other side. We don't have to do this to the top and bottom because they're going to be stationary when we've got the spine on our front and back cover. So now I need to do some mitering. So what I'm going to do, but before I do my mitering, I would like to put some tape on this. Because it just makes it easier in the end. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I sometimes forget to do this step, and you can still do it. It's just a little messier. Turn it around and repeat. And the top one can be shorter because you're cutting off this section with your scissors, so you don't have to have it the whole distance. All right, so let's burnish these. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our scissors. So I'm going to turn it over to the back side, so hopefully that makes it easier to see. And I am cutting from this fold line up to this fold line. So I'm going to mitre my corner like this. And why you're doing this is you want to remove the bulk that you're going to have, because you've got several layers of cardstock. So from this fold line down to that fold line. And then you're going to repeat that 2 more times. So from fold line to fold line. And the last one, there we go. All right, so now what we're going to use is I'm going to remove the backing from my score tape. And I'm going to take my art glitter glue. And I am going to run a bead of glitter glue, not on top of the chipboard, along the side of the chipboard on the cardstock. And what this does is it softens the fibers of the cardstock and makes it much easier to fold, and you get less cracking. And of course, because this is artisan, you won't probably get any cracking. And then I like to take my burnishing tool and I like to push it down right up against the edge of that chipboard and pull it out. And turn it around and do that again. So I am bringing my burnishing tool right to that score line or the edge of the chipboard, and then I am pushing down and pulling out. And this is what you should have. So we're going to turn it around and we're going to repeat this on the other end. And I'm going to run a bit of art glitter glue along the edge of my chipboard. I'm going to turn it sideways and I'm going to use my burnishing tool. I'm pulling it down with my finger, so I'm pulling away from it. And then I'm taking, and you could use this burnishing tool too. I just prefer my wider one. So tools are something that are personal. You have to decide what it is you want them to do and then go from there. So this is what I'm going to be left with. So we're going to set this aside so it has some time to dry before we move on with our next part of making this our spine that attaches to the front and back cover. So I'm going to get out one of my chipboard cover pieces along with my cardstock. So the cardstock that we're covering the front and back cover with measures 10.5, pardon me, 8.5 by 10.5. I'm going to lay it down so it's up in that left-hand corner of your scoreboard. Like I say, this is making your tools work for you. For this, I only need the 1 inch across the top and the 1 inch down the side for my spacer. And I've already put all my adhesive on the back of my chipboard. Give it a good burnish. And remove the backing. And then we're going to take it and we are going to butt it up against the piece of chipboard at the top and on the left-hand side, and then lay it down. And I'm going to flip this over and give it a good burnish. And we're going to do some folding just like we did on the spine piece. So making the chipboard help you fold the cardstock. Fold it over. Take your burnishing tool. Burnish out those little wings or the sides or that 1 inch. Turn it over again. So now I'm doing the bottom or the other end. So I like to start with my shorter sides first, and then I like to do my longer sides. But you can do it any way you would like. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It's what works best for you. All right, and this is where we should be. So you should have all your fold lines so that you have 4 little corners, 1 in each corner, I guess is what I want to say. And we are going to take 3/8 inch score tape and we are going to run it across the top. And we don't have to go side to side because we're going to be doing some cutting. Turn, do the other end. Turn, do the side. And repeat one more time. And then we're just going to set this aside, and we've got some burnishing to do. Burnish all your score tape. Okay, and that's where we should be at. That's what you should have. Now we need to do some cutting. So what we want to do is, I'm going to turn it over and see if I can show you from this side. There's a fold line here and a fold line there. We want to cut up on the fold line, but don't quite cut to the chipboard. Probably about a 1/16 of an inch. And we can't see it from this side, so we have to work from the other side. So it's a little harder to see those fold lines. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut along that fold line to about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard. And repeat on both sides. And if it falls out like that, you've done well. Usually I have to give it a little tug. So about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard. And 2 more to go on this one. 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard. And this is more like it, where you got to give a little tug. And last corner. Okay, let's get rid of this little bits of paper. And so this is what you should have. Just seeing a bubble in my dry adhesive, and I want to make sure I burnish it out. So this is what you should have. 4 cutout corners, and now we have to miter them a little bit, because what we don't want to have is we don't want to have any overhang happening, and if you didn't miter them, that's what you'd be left with, and it doesn't look that neat, and there's a good chance you're probably going to see it on the other side. So this is why I like to miter my corners. And then turn the other side. And then we're just going to repeat that on all the other corners. So you're just mitering. So what you're doing is you're folding over the one flap, leaving your other flap extended, and just doing a slight mitering of the corner. So we've got 2 sides left to go. And again, 1 left to go on this one. And this is what you should be left with. Just let me get these little bits out of the way. So here's what you should be left with. So now what we want to do is we want to remove the score tape that's on our chipboard. Now I know some people have used glue to do this. I have not had any success doing it that way. So I prefer to use my dry adhesive and then use my wet adhesive for only this step, which is I want to run a bead of art glitter glue on the cardstock right up against the edge of the chipboard, just like we did on the spine piece. So we're going to remove the backing, and then I'm going to turn this all sideways. That's where I find it easier to work with. And we're going to use our burnishing tool and just make sure that glue has full coverage along the edge of the chipboard, and pull the tab over the chipboard and down. And that's what you should end up with. Get out a dry baby wipe because we have some glue. So we're going to repeat that process on the other end. And I like to do my short ends first and then my long ends. That again is sort of a personal preference. Do what works for you. We're going to again run. Turn it this way so maybe it's easier for you guys to see. Run my bead of art glitter glue along the edge of the chipboard. Then I'm going to take my burnishing tool and rub the edge of the chipboard through the cardstock and pull down the tab. Okay, now dropping it into my little garbage bin. And run a bead of art glitter glue or wet adhesive, whatever your adhesive of choice might be. And take your burnishing tool, rub along the edge of the chipboard from the outer edge of the cardstock, and pull it down and pull it towards the center of the chipboard. Okay, I'm going to turn it again. Remove the backing. Run a bead of wet adhesive. Burnish it. Pull towards the center of the chipboard. And once you've got all your corners done, give it a good burnish. And this is what you have, one of your covers. So we're going to set this aside and work on our second cover. So again, 8.5 by 10.5 on the 8.5 inch side along the top. Put down your spacer, your 1-inch spacer. Remove the backing from our dry adhesive. Again, what we are going to do is we are going to butt it up against the top piece of chipboard, laying it down along the edge of the side piece of chipboard, removing our spacer, and this is what we're left with. Now we're going to turn it over and give it a good burnish. So like I said before, I am constructing this album using the Craft Artisan cardstock that you can get from Country Craft Creations. So we're going to fold using the chipboard to help us fold the cardstock over. And repeat on the other end. Then let's do the sides, for the longer sides. And do the last side. We are going to run our 3/8 of an inch tape along the top. Along the bottom. Turn. Do one long side without knocking your art glitter glue over. And repeating on the last side. Burnish your score tape. So this is the second time I've done this particular tutorial video. I deleted the first one. I wasn't a very happy camper. But such is life. What are you going to do about it? You're just going to do it again. Alright, so here's what you're left with. We now need to cut out our 4 corners. Taking our scissors, cut up to the chipboard to a 1/16 of an inch. Turn, cut up to the chipboard to within a 1/16 of an inch. Repeat on all 4 corners. guess 2 more. Just another tiny little snip. And last one. And carefully. There's always one, isn't there? Or as I say, just because it can. So there's one that I didn't cut as nicely as my other corners I was cutting out. So we're going to start with this one. So we want to make sure that we have our scissors right up against the chipboard. And then you just pivot them ever so slightly. And miter. And can you see that burr? We're going to get rid of that right now by mitering. I'd rather have that burr than be too close to the edge. So we just need to cut that little burr out of there. There we go. All right, let's repeat on the other 3 corners, mitering our cardstock so we have some nice I believe, oh no, we got one more to go. Get rid of our snips. And here we go again. This is what we should be left with. So we are going to put our wet adhesive over on this side. Remove the score tape backing from the score tape that's on the chipboard. Remove the score tape backing from the piece that is on our cardstock. Run a bead of art glitter glue using our scoring tool, or burnishing tool I should say. Pull down, turn, and repeat on the other end. So I do the 2 short ends first, and then the 2 long ends. The 2 short sides, and then the 2 long sides. And again, that's my preference. So this is not my method, or I didn't invent this method for lack of a better word. I saw Tammy Merrill use this idea for wrapping chipboard because it's a lot easier on the hands. And let me tell you, my old hands like easy. And I love it so much that now it is the only way I make my album covers. So last side, a bead of the art glitter glue, burnish, fold, pull. And there is our other cardstock chipboard cover. So now this is what we have. We have two covers, a front and a back, or a front and a back. And we have our spine piece. And we need to do a little bit more work on this spine piece before we can adhere it to the covers. So just let me do that. So we need to add some dry adhesive to our wings. And some of you are saying, well, yeah, I'm just going to add it to the wrong side because we don't want to see that. But here's the issue. We need to add it to the good side because our cover will be going on like so. So our wings are on, as I call it, the bad side of the chipboard. So let's just move our covers out of the way for a second so we can get this adhesive on. So you want to make sure you know where this fold line is because you don't want to be putting any adhesive too close to that fold line. So I like to make sure that I have my adhesive back about 1/8 of an inch maybe. And it's trial and error that will help you decide where exactly you want this adhesive to go, because you don't want to see any of it. Once you have your book made. And it's not so bad with the dry adhesive if you see some of it, but it will collect dust and dirt over time. And I just don't want that. So about 1/8 of an inch away from the fold line. And when you use the wet adhesive to do this process, you end up with it sometimes squeezing out, and it's messy. Okay, so that is our taping. Give it a good burnish. And then we are going to take our scissors and do some mitering. So I'm going to turn it over to the bad side, as I call it. So we want to miter from this fold line down. And what the purpose of this is to cut out as much of this bulk as possible, because you're going to have lots of layers. So it's something like that. And that. All right, so we want to make sure that we miter. And then we're going to turn it and miter the other side. Well, let's go to this side. So again, you're mitering from the corner down. And repeat on the other two corners. And one more. And the reason I like to put my adhesive on first is just like when I was doing the folding over the top and bottom. I believe it just gives me a cleaner finished product. So here we go. Their covers back in. And I am going to let my scoreboard help me. I'm going to take one of my covers. And before I actually lay this down, I always like to give a little dry fit. Make sure that everything is the right size, because I'm sure we can all relate that we've all cut things wrong. So that looks good. And then I want to try and show you what I want to do. So the only way I can do that is to hold it up like this. So this is my spine cover, and I like to have it at a angle before I actually lay it down to give me enough time to make sure that everything is nice and straight and that I'm going to be happy with my cover. So let's put this back down on the scoreboard. Let's find my little pick that will take the backing off my score tape. And we want to angle this, making sure, and I like to have it right up against the piece of chipboard, and then fold it down. Okay, and so that's what it's going to look like on the back side now. So why we were cutting out all that paper is we got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of cardstock in these corners. So that's why we want to miter out as much excess bulk as possible. So now we're going to turn it over, and we're going to work on putting our other cover, or attaching our other cover to our spine. Okay, and we are going to have it at an angle until we're happy. And I believe I am. So I'm going to lay it down. And now I want to do some burnishing. And burnish. Let's just put that aside for a second. Put our pick up over here. People won't believe how tidy I'm keeping my workspace today. And then because it's artisan, I know I can fold it right over on itself. And we want to repeat this on the other side. And there is almost the cover of our album. The only thing we still have to do is we need to reinforce our spine area. So that's where this piece of cardstock comes in handy. So this piece of cardstock measures 6 by 8 3/8. And we want to dry fit to start with. And if we're happy, so what we're looking at here is to make sure we don't have any overhang at the bottom or at the top. And we need to put some adhesive on the back of this reinforcement piece. So I'm going to get out my wide adhesive. And if I get in the way, I apologize. And so all I like to do is just run it . And I like to turn it and do the other outer edge. So I always run my score tape the length, the longest side, the length of it. And I don't know why I like to do that, but that is just my go-to. Now I believe this is going to be too wide. Yes. Get some narrower. And then, again, it's too wide. So I have score tape in multiple lengths, or widths, I guess I should say. And that's just how I like to roll. So we are going to burnish all this score tape. If you have score sheets, that can make the process go a little faster. But I'm trying to use up some of my wider tape before it's not sticky anymore. And I don't know if that happens to this tape or not. But I don't want to take the chance. I want to use it so I can buy more tape. And if you got any overhang, and what I mean by overhang is, can you, I wonder if I have that. No, that makes it worse. So the overhang is any tape that might be hanging over the edges, and you just want to fold that back on itself, because what you don't want, you might see it there a little bit, is you don't want the dust and dirt from life getting on that edge of tape, because it's just going to look messy over time. Okay, so get our book back up here. Get our little pick out of the way. All right, here we go. So we're going to center it side to side, top to bottom. And when we're happy, we're going to set it down. And I think I'm happy there. And we are going to take our burnishing tool. So what we don't want to have happen is any little air bubbles underneath this reinforcement piece. So give it a really good burnish. You might want to use more than one burnishing tool for this purpose. We all have our ways and what we like to do. So now I am just folding right up against the edge of the spine chipboard. And then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to repeat the process. I go a little slow, because remember, this paper's going, what do you want me to do? But remember, paper's a fiber. There we go. And then we're going to repeat and make sure we're happy with our covers. And I am. Kind of look to see if I've got any bubbles. I don't. So that makes me extremely happy. And this is what you want to see, a nice, clean outside edge. You can burnish it a bit more if you think you need to. And that's what I'm going for. Okay, so now we're going to start on our hinge piece. Our hinge piece measures 4 1/4 by 8. And we've got to do some scoring on our hinge piece. So I'm just going to get my little instructions out here. So we are scoring at 1/2, 1, 1 5/8, 2 1/8, 2 5/8, 3 1/4, and 3 3/4. So we need to put some adhesive onto our hinge. So we're going to turn it over to the bumpy side. And what I mean by the bumpy side is after you've done your scoring, you have these little indents that I like to refer to as your valley. And you have this little bump on the backside that I like to refer to as your hill. And what we're going to do is we're going to be putting some score tape on our 1/2 inch spaces in between our bumps. I hope that makes sense. So we are going to start. So here's a 1/2 inch and a score line and a 1/2 inch. We are going to be putting our tape on the second 1/2 inch space. And we are going to put that score tape close to the 5/8. So once I get this on, I'm going to lift it up and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So there is our first 1/2 inch. There is our score line. I put my score tape on the next 1/2 inch, and this is my 5/8 of an inch gusset. So we are going to repeat that 2 more times. So we are going to again, there's the 1/2 inch, second 1/2 inch, and we are putting the tape close to the score line that starts the 5/8 gusset. And one last time. So this score tape is going on the outer edge. Don't go over, just go along the outer edge, like so. And we are going to burnish these score lines, not score lines, the adhesive. Okay, so now we are going to start folding. And we're going to fold back on the score line, burnish it, and we're going to do all of our burnishing or folding of our score lines today. I am going to go to my second hinge, doing exactly the same thing. And I am going to now turn it around, and I'm going to fold on that last score line for the 1/2 inch. And fold it back on itself. So you should have one hinge. And if we kind of fold this up, should let us do the other side. So there's one hinge, 2 hinges, and there is our 3 hinges. So let's kind of straighten it out. Remove the adhesive from our first hinge. Fold it over. Use our burnishing tool. Sometimes it's better to work from the good side so you don't end up stretching your hinge. I've had that happen. And then fold it down. And again, let's burnish it. Fold it back on itself. And I'm always watching to make sure that everything is straight along my edges, that I'm not creating a crooked hinge, because I have done that in the past. Last one. Again, let it fold down on itself and then burnish it. And there are your 3 hinges created. And I always like to come over to the edge of my scoreboard, measure, making sure that I'm nice and square. I am very happy with that. So I'm going to get out a little bit of score tape. I believe, no, that's a little too wide for my purpose. I believe this is 1/2 inch score tape. And so I am putting this 1/2 inch score tape on those 5/8 of an inch gusset. So on the back side or the wrong side of your hinge that you just created. So let me burnish these and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Don't put score tape on this. This is a hinge. So here are your 3 hinges. Let's give them a good burnish, making them work both ways because they're going to be turning in this book. And then back the other way. And burnish again. So there's your 3 hinges. And there is the score tape on the back side of your 2 gussets. So now let's get the book and bring the book into our picture. Now in the directions I say to lay down some pattern paper here, but I haven't decided what I am going to be covering this particular book in, so what my pattern paper is going to be. So I am going to lay down my hinge without any pattern paper today, and I am okay with that. So you just want to measure, and when you're happy, get your little pencil, and we're going to make some guide marks. So I'm going to just put a line here, a line here, and a line here. You can erase these after. And if I'm still happy, sometimes I actually measure. Oh, I'm happy with that. So now we're going to remove the backing. So don't forget, if you want to cover your spine with pattern paper, you need to do it before you put your hinge down. But because I am not sure what I'm going to be using this album for, I am not putting any pattern paper down. So I like to just pull my tape out just a little bit until I'm happy. And then of course sometimes your fingers don't want to pick up the end of it. Yes, that's so much fun. One side, and now the other side. And there are your hinges, or your hinge, not hinges. Well, I guess it's hinges because that's what these are. It is in your book. And I am very happy with that. So we are going to set the book away for a minute because we have to create our base pages. So let's do that. And here are our base pages. You need 3 that measure 8 by 12. And yes, your base page is the same height as your hinge because of the way we are going to add our pages to our hinges. They need to be exactly the same height. So on the 12-inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. And again, you can use your scoreboard to work with you. So folding over on that score line, giving it a nice crisp burnish. And there's one. So with the second, doing the same thing, making sure it's nice and square, folding on the score line, and give it a good burnish. 2, the last one. Again, we're repeating the same thing. Give it a good burnish. And let's get our book back up in the picture. So we have 3 pages that are going to be going on 3 hinges. So what we want to do is we're starting at the back of the book. And we're laying our hinge right up against, no, we're laying our page right up against the hinge. And then we're going to fold that hinge over. And we're going to make sure that from top to bottom, so from this edge to this edge, we don't have any of the page hanging over. And then you're just going to fold it back on itself, and you're going to see, is that page straight? And if it's not, this is when you can adjust things just ever so slightly. And I seem to have a problem, so let me just try this one more time. Just want to bring it up to the hinge. You don't want it going under. You want your page to be straight with the hinge. Sorry if my head is getting in the way. And I'm just going to check this again. That is what's going to make me happy. Okay, so what you want to do is try not to move anything. Get your glue out. And we are just going to hold the base page down, turn and put glue on the back side of your hinge. And you didn't want to do that, so because you moved it. And we need to make an adjustment here. And if I'm happy, I'm going to lay this down. Not going to fold it or burnish yet because I might have to do a little bit of moving of things. I believe I am happy. So we're going to burnish, making sure that if any of the glue, get that wiped up. Give it another little burnish. And then turning it over. Laying this down. So now what we want to do is we're going to run a bead of glitter glue, art glitter glue, or wet adhesive along the bottom of the page and on the front side of the hinge because we're creating a pocket. Now I didn't make any inserts for my pockets. I decided with this album I was just going to let them be a storage space for, you know, whatever you might like to put in there. But in saying that, there's nothing to stop you from making inserts. So that is one page in our book. So let's get the next page. And we are going to repeat that same process, But the nice thing is now we have something to kind of line everything up to. And the big thing you want to be concerned about, I just want to burnish this hinge because it seems like it's kind of stiff. And they are stiff in the beginning, but the more you move them, the better they turn. So let's check this again. Now what I'm looking for now is, am I even at each side? So am I even at the top and even at the bottom? If I am, that makes me very happy because that's what I want. So I'm going to open my base page without moving it. That's the tricky part. Fold back my hinge. Add my adhesive. And then fold the hinge onto the base page. Get your baby wipes, so if any glue. Get your burnishing tool. Give it a good burnish. And you know what? This is where you want to take your time, is in your construction. You don't want to be rushing because this is the foundation of your album. You want everything nice and straight. It's going to make it easier when you put your flips and your flaps and your pockets on. Okay, and then make sure we're still happy with how square we are, which I am. You're going to run a bead of wet adhesive along the bottom. And you're going to run it on the front of your hinge. Just put a little bit down here. Okay, and then you're going to fold it over. And then give it a nice little burnish with your baby wipe. And then I like to get my burnishing tool. Okay, that is page 2 on. Now for your last page, which technically is your first page, we want to make sure that we're top to bottom on the hinge. We also want to make sure that we're nice and square at our finished edge of our page. And if we're happy with all of that, remember, use your hand to hold the page in place. Get your art glitter glue. Run a bead if you can, keeping it straight. And then fold the hinge over onto the base page. Burnishing it with your burnishing tool. Check the other side to make sure we don't have any glue. And then run a bead. Run a bead of your glue along the bottom of your base page and on the front side, as I call it, of your hinge. There we go. Oops, kind of move things. There we are. burnish. No glue. Happy. All right, so there are 3 pages in your album ready for your flips and flaps. So we're going to set the album aside, and we are going to start working. You have 2 pieces of cardstock, one that measures 4 3/8. So there is your half. So 3/8 is between half and a quarter. So it's 4 3/8 by 8. Your second one is 5 1/2 by 8. So on the 5 1/2 by 8, with a 5 1/2 inch side along the top, you are going to score at 1/2. And then on your 4 3/8 by 8, you are also going to score on 1/2 on the 4 3/8 side. So let's fold on those score lines. And burnish those score lines. We are going to mitre our tabs because these 2 pieces, let's get the album up here again, these 2 pieces run from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, and this might be a good time just to make sure you don't have any overhang. So just kind of dry fit them in the book for a second, just to make sure, because sometimes we might have to cut off an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch. All right, so we want to mitre our tabs because they run the top to bottom. And we don't want anybody seeing a tab. And that is on both pieces. So let's burnish on those score lines. We've mitered. So we want to do a little prep work on our flap that measured 5 1/2 by 8 with the corner at the top, because we are going to be adhering our smaller flap to the top of our larger flap, but we want it backed up from the edge of our 5 1/2 inch flap by about an inch, or whatever you would like, because remember, you're making your book. So I am going to hold it in place, put a bead of wet adhesive down the 1/2 inch tab, fold it back under, and burnish. And burnish. Open it. We can get rid of our little note. Okay, and we are going to be putting a magnet on this to hold it in place. So hopefully I don't forget to do that with you. So now I want to take my corner rounder, and I am using a We Are Memory Keepers Crocodile Corner Chomper, and I am going to use the stub end of the one I have. You could just do a round corner if you wanted to. You could do nothing at all if you wanted to. The choice is yours. Now remember, I want to make sure that what I'm rounding doesn't have my tab on it when I get to the larger flap. So let's do this. And I will. So there's what we have. Just let me give it another burnish. So we have a flap that's going to open this way, and then this flap is going to open this way on our book. So let's get our book back up. Put our ruler up and our pencil because we don't need them anymore. So we are going to be adhering this flap to the left-hand side of the front of page 1. And what you want to make sure is that you don't have any overhang top to bottom, because we would still have time to fix it. And you want to make sure you keep this flap back from your hinge so that when you turn your pages, everything is going to turn nicely. So get your flap out or your tab out. Add your wet adhesive or whatever adhesive you are using. And fold it back. Turn it to make sure that nothing is going to be in the way, and nothing is. So now we can burnish this tab. We are going to get out our magnets. So I need an X or a plus and a minus. So a plus, if you look at it like that, I see the plus and a minus. And I don't really care which one I am going to be using here. What I care more about is the placement of the magnet on my base page, because we can't put it in the center because it's not going to be catching this flap. So we have to move it, offset it to the left a little bit. And so you just want to put your finger there, see if you can feel it, and if you can, you probably have it in the right spot. So just lift it, turn it, lift off the backing, and kind of flip it back onto itself. Need some adhesive to hold it in place. So I just like to run some adhesive over my magnet so that it doesn't move on me. Not that I've ever had it, but I don't want my magnet to shift onto my pattern paper. And here's the other side. And another bit of our Scor tape. In here. And that is the front of page 1. So let's turn to the back. To the back of page 1. So on the back of page 1, we are creating a pocket. Move the book. And we have a booklet that's going to go in that pocket. So on this page, we have a piece of cardstock that measures 4 by 9 less a 16th. So you just want to back your cardstock up in your trimmer or your cutter just a hair, so like a 16th of an inch, because you don't want this pocket hanging over the top or bottom of the base page. We are going to score on the 4-inch side at 1/2, Then we are going to turn it to the 9-inch side and score at 1/2. Then we're going to flip it completely around to the other end of the 9-inch side and score at 1/2. And you're saying, why are you flipping? Well, for two reasons. I want to get a true 1/2 inch. So if I did a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch here, that would not be true because remember we cut off a 1/16. So that's why I always like to flip my pockets and draw my 1/2 inch score line up against the left-hand side of the scoreboard. So let's fold on those score lines. Burnish the score lines. And then we need to do some mitering. We are going to mitre, so this is the top of the pocket. So we're going to mitre the tabs at the top of the pocket. Then we are going to cut through the X that we've created when we made our 1/2 inch score lines and created these two 1/2 inch tabs. So we are cutting right through the center of that X to get rid of some bulk. And repeat on the other side. Again, cutting through the X to get rid of the bulk. And then we want to give this another burnish. So burnish on the side that doesn't have the tabs. So you folded all your tabs under. So you are burnishing on the good side of your pocket. And you want to burnish this so that everything is going to lay flat. So there's the pocket. So then we're making a booklet that's going in this pocket, and it measures 7 1/4 by 11. And we are scoring on the 11-inch side at 5 1/2. So put that up in the corner and then fold it back on itself, making sure it's nice and square. Burnish that score line. Then we are going to take our stub corner rounder and we are going to do all 4 corners. So this is what you're going to be left with. And that is our booklet. So let's get the book back up in front of us. So this pocket is going to be on the right-hand side of the base page. But keeping in mind you want to back it up from the edge of the hinge, I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, just so when you turn your page, everything is going to be turning smoothly. So let's put some wet adhesive on our 1/2 inch tabs. So I'm just going to turn my book so that I can see what I'm doing. And you want to make sure that you're not going over the edge from the top or the bottom. And remember, we cut this just slightly smaller than the actual height of the page. So when you're happy, which I believe I am there, burnish it down, get your baby wipe, and then do some burnishing. Use your other burnishing tool Whatever you need to do to be happy with your pocket. I am happy with that. Just get my little spatula out here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I didn't glue down anything to the inside of the pocket, which I didn't. And then your little booklet is going to go inside this base little pocket that you put on the base page. And there's the back of page 1, I should say, finished. So we're moving on to the front of page 2. And the front of page 2 consists of some flaps. So let's move the book. So the larger of the flaps measures 6 by 7 3/8, give or take. Let me double check something here. Our flap is measuring right. So 6 1/4 less an eighth, or 6 1/8 on that side, and then on this side it's 7 3/8, or as I say in the directions, 8 less an eighth. So that's totally your call, but the reason I've done this is I don't want any overhang of this flap. And then on the 6 1/4 side is what I'm going to call it, you score at 1/2. And then you're creating 2 smaller flaps that are going to measure 5 1/4 by 5 3/4. So let's burnish those score lines. And we're going to do some mitering of our corners. Using the stub. And remember, I'm not mitering my tab. I'm mitering the raw edge of the cardstock. Okay, so we want to also miter the tab on the larger flap. So just a slight miter. We shouldn't see anything because we did back it up that 1/8 of an inch, but just in case. And some people miter all of their corners or all of their tabs. I don't usually. So I'm going to get our book back in. So we have the bottom, top. I'm turning it so it's facing this way. This is the bottom, this is the top. So this would make this the right-hand side of the base page. And I just want to have a little dry fit here. So because I cut an 1/8 of an inch smaller than my page, my base page, I'm going to be centering this top to bottom. So let's get some wet adhesive on our 1/2 inch tab. And again, we want to center it top to bottom, making sure you're not going over the edge of the base page. It's always a good idea just to flip it up and double check, because you still have time to move it. Burnish. All right, so now turn your book back around the right side or right way. So this is the top of the book, this is the bottom. And we have these two smaller flaps. And what we're doing with them is one flap is going at the top of the page, and the other flap is going at the bottom of the page. And what I'm doing with these two flaps is I'm backing them in about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So the 1/8 of an inch from the edge of this flap so it doesn't interfere with the flap turning, and 1/8 of an inch from the hinge edge so that the page can turn without any interference. So let's put some adhesive on our 1/2 inch tabs on these two flaps. So we'll start with the one at the top, making sure we've got it in about 1/8 of an inch, give or take. This is just eyeballing. And if we are happy, and then find our burnishing tool. And we're going to need a magnet to keep this all closed. So we'll put that on after we have all our flaps in the right spot. Like so. Happy, happy. Sorry if I was out of the shot there. So put 1/8 of an inch from that flap so that we're not going to be causing any problems when we want to close up that flap. Making sure we're not over the edge. And burnishing. Burnishing. And then it's going to close like so. So that's going to be what we have. Okay, so we want to place 2 magnets. Well, 1 magnet, but a negative and a positive of that set of magnets. Now, I want to show you a little trick. So remember we put a magnet on the front of page 1. What we don't want to have happen here is that the magnet we are going to be putting on this flap to be attracting to this magnet over here. We want it to be the opposite. So in this particular case, your 2 negatives are attracting to each other. What we want to put here is the positive. So when we close this up and fold it over, these 2 magnets will fight. So we won't be ending up with something like this. It would be your pages pulling together if the 2 magnets. So if we use the negative here, when we would close this page and close up this page, those 2 magnets are going to attract to each other. That's what we don't want. So we know it's the 2 negatives. So what I want to do is over here, centering this magnet once I get the backing off of it, use my picky tool. I want to place this magnet in the center of my flap. Remove it. Add some score tape. And like I say, this is just something I do because somewhere along my journey, I heard somebody say, if you don't do this, you always have a chance of your magnets moving. I have never had that problem, but I don't want it either. So I'm going to take the backing off of this, and then you are going to fold this flap over and down. And there we have our magnet on the base page. So fold our flaps in, fold our flap over, and now these two pages are not attracting to each other. So now we're going to move on to the back of page 2. And on the back of page 2, we are creating another flap with a little booklet on the front of it. So we have, let's get our measurements here for you. We have a piece that measures 5 7/8, so that's an eighth of an inch back from 6 by 8 1/4. And then we're making a little booklet that measures 4 1/4 by 8 1/2. So let's start with the little booklet. So on the 8 1/2 inch side, you want to score it 4 1/4. And on the flap, you want to score it at, on the 8 1/4 inch side, at 1/2. So let's burnish our score lines. And burnish our score lines on our little booklet, making sure it's nice and square. So this flap is going to go on the the back of page 2. And then this little booklet is going to sit right like this. So we're going to be putting a magnet here. No, actually here. So the magnet will go here, and our pattern paper is going to go on top of it. But what this small magnet is going to adhere to, let's get the book. That small magnet is going to adhere to the magnet that is on the front of page 2. So we won't be putting the magnet on. It doesn't go on until just before you're gluing or adhering the booklet. And we don't want to adhere the booklet yet because you want to put pattern paper on the outside of this flap and then put your booklet down. Then center your magnet, then put the pattern paper on the front of your booklet. So let's just check this out, see if we're happy. I am going to miter my corners. That's what I've decided to do. This is a case where it's totally up to you. Well, it's always up to you because you're making the book. Okay, so we're going to center this. No, actually we're not. We are going to place this booklet down as far to the left-hand side of the base page as possible. So again, when you turn your page, it isn't going to interfere with the hinge turning. So definitely we need it to miter those hinges, or that half-inch tab. Adhesive, I'm going to turn the book around, so I am actually working with it upside down right now. And with the pencil, starting to clutter up my workspace. We all can appreciate that because it happens to us all. Making sure you're not over the top of the page. And you could have rounded the corners of this flap first, or like I am going to do in this case, I am going to round them after I get this all burnished. Okay, so take our stub corner rounder, and let's round. It is so much easier doing this before you put it in the book. But you know what? Sometimes we forget. Let's do it this way. Maybe it'll be easier. Yes. Okay. Only thing I don't like about this corner rounder is you've always got to clean up. Something's always falling out of it. All right. So there is our front flap adhered to the base page. And here is our little booklet that's going to go on top. This circle with the line through it is going to remind me that I need to place a small magnet. I'm just going to write the word small so I don't forget, because you're going to cover that with pattern paper. Just going to take a paper clip and adhere it. So now we're on to the front of page 3. And the front of page 3 has some stack pockets going on. So we need these two pieces to start with. So these two pieces that are going to make the pocket and the little belly band slash pocket. So we're going to start with the actual pocket. It measures 3 by 7 less a 16th. You are going to score on the 3-inch side at 1/2 inch. Rotate to the 7-inch side. Score at 1/2 inch. Do a 180 and score at 1/2 inch on the other end. So we're going to fold on those score lines. And again. And we have to do some mitering. So this is the top of the pocket. So we're going to miter our 1/2 inch tabs at the top of the pocket. And then we are going to cut through the X, as I call it. So there is the X, and right there is where those two lines intersect. That's what we want to cut through. You don't want to cut into the pocket or you're going to have a hole down in this corner. That's what you don't want to do. Again on the other side. Get rid of our bits. Give it a good burnish. So I'm burnishing on the good side of the pocket. Then we want to take our smaller belly band slash pockets and we're going to score at 1/2 inch on both ends. So 1/2 inch on the 7-inch side, flip it completely around, 1/2 inch on the 7-inch side, because remember we took off a 16th. So we are going to miter, and I usually only miter the top of this belly band. If you want, you can miter both ends. So you're mitering on those 1/2 inch tabs. back up, and we want to start with the true pocket first. And we want to make sure that we are happy. So when we lay down this pocket, we are going to be laying down the pocket right over on the right-hand side of this page 3, because we want the page to turn, so we don't want anything close to the hinge. So let's get our glue, wet glue. And then I'm going to turn, no, I'm going to leave the book just exactly how it is. So we want to make sure that pocket is right over on the right hand side of the page, not interfering with our hinge that is on the left side of this page. Burnish the pocket. And then the belly band is going to sit right on top. So I actually butt this belly band right up to the pocket. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave some space. I just prefer the cleaner look of it being right up against the pocket that's on the bottom. So I'm going to add my adhesive to the 1/2-inch tabs. And that's a bit of glue. Okay, so we're going to start over here on the right hand side, making sure we got them lined up. We do. And then laying it down on the opposite side. Burnish, burnish, wiping up any glue. And while this dries a little bit, I'm going to give you the measurements for the inserts that go into this set of stacked pockets. So you're going to need 2 photo mats that measure 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. You're going to need 2 photo mats that measure 4 1/2 by 5 1/2. And you're going to need 2 photo mats that measure 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. And we want to round all of the corners on these mats. That's what I don't like, is the stuff that falls out of the chomper when you lay it down. Last ones. Okay, and let's get rid of all these little pieces. Bring our book back up. So the 2 smaller photo mats are going in the bottom pocket, along with the 2 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And then the larger is going in the behind the belly band, going down into the bottom pocket, because there's no stoppage on these pockets. So it goes right to the bottom of the page. So that is the front of page 3. Let's do the back of page 3. So the back of page 3 consists of 4 flaps. We have 2 flaps that measure 5 1/2 by 6. Oh, one piece I didn't need. And we have 2 flaps that measure 5 by 6.5. So on the 5 by 6.5 flaps, you are scoring on the 6.5 inch side at 1/2. And on your flaps that measure 5.5 by 6, you are scoring on the 5.5 inch side at 1/2. And we are going to remember to round our corners with the decorative punch. And that's the one thing I do like about the chomper is you can do more than one sheet of paper at a time. Okay. So let's burnish those score lines. And let's also burnish these score lines. We can get rid of our little note. So in this album, I used 3 sets of magnets and 1 side of a small magnet. So for magnets, that's not too bad. So let's get the book back in. So this is the top, this is the bottom. We are going to start by putting on our top flap and our bottom flap. And I am going to offset these left and right so that when they're finally adhered, it's going to look something like that. So you're going to be able to see a little of this flap and a little of this flap. So I don't need to mitre, but if you want to, feel free. I am going to turn my book around so I'm upside down, because then that way I can work and see where the edge of my page is. So let's put my adhesive on my 1/2 inch tab. And then I'm probably going to come in probably almost 1/4 of an inch, maybe not quite that much. I'm just going to eyeball this. I know people that know me are going saying, did she just say she's just going to eyeball something? Yes, I did. So that's the flap that's at the top of the page. Now we're going to turn the book around, because the next flap that is going in is the one that I want on the bottom of the page. And again, I am going to bring it in from the edge of the page, probably not quite 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Again, that is your choice. Adding my adhesive to my tab. So, making sure that I'm staying on the page. Like that. And there's what you end up with. I want to burnish my score line, or my tabs, I should say, not my score lines. I already did that. Front and back. Just a little too high for my liking, so I'm just going to fix that while I can. That's the nice thing about the wet glue, is you do have just a touch of wiggle room. Okay, so now your other 2 flaps. They are going to go one on the left-hand side of that page and one on the right-hand side of that page. And what I'm using as my guide, so my 1/2 inch tab that I attached the top flap and the bottom flap to the book, I am kind of using them as my guide as to how far up from the bottom of the page and how far down from the top of the page I want to put these flaps that go on the left and right hand side of this page. So we're going to start with the one on the left hand side. So I'm going to turn my book this way. I'm going to add my adhesive to that 1/2 inch tab. I am going to go and put it on the page just under the tab that is at the top of the page. I just wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing there, because I have glued things on upside down in the past. And then you just go, I can make this work. Okay. And now your other tab that is going on the right hand side of the page, turn the book around again, and it is going to go just above this tab that is on this flap, so the flap that's at the bottom of the book. So I'm going to be happy with that. Add some adhesive. And again, don't let it get in the way of your turning of your page, so keep it in a little bit. If you're happy, give it a small burnish. And then what I like to do is I like to close it up, close it up, close it up, and see if my page is going to turn, which it is. So I'm a happy lady. So let's burnish this the rest of the way. No, I won't say it yet. No, I won't say it. All right. So here is what you have. You have a flap and a flap and 2 flaps for the sides. I am putting my 2 flaps that are on the left hand and right hand side of the page down first, then my bottom flap and my top flap. So for the magnet we're going to be using, I need a positive and a negative. And we are just going to see how this is going to work. Okay, so in this particular case, I am not so worried about my placement of this magnet, but if I actually want it to be in the center of my page, what I'm going to do is I'm using the negative or the positive side down on this particular magnet so that it's not going to attract to that magnet that's on my page 2. So I hope that makes sense. Get the backing off of the magnet. And again, for me, it's the positive side because it's not going to attract to that other half. And then I'm going to lay that down because the other side, this magnet is going on the back of this top flap. So that flap that's at the top of the page, that's where the magnet is going to be adhering. And fold it over. And then what we want to do is we want to put some score tape, and it's okay that it's off-centered because remember that flap is off-centered. It's not in the middle of the page. But as long as I have a good thumb width, I'll be okay with that. All right, so in, up, down. There we go. So that we have now finished the 3 pages of our book. We're going to work on what's going in the front cover and what's going to go in the back cover. So in the front cover, or on the inside front cover, it is an angled pocket, and it measures 6 by 6.5. So on the 6-inch side, you want to score at 1/2. And then what you want to do is you want to turn your page clockwise so that you score at a 1/2 inch at the bottom of the page. So I'll go through that again. On the 6-inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Then you are going to turn your page clockwise and score at 1/2 again. So let's burnish on our score lines. And we are going to do some mitering of our corner. It's the only mitering we have to do on this page, or this flap. So cut through the X and give it another burnish. Okay, now I'm going to get my little cutter out because we need to angle this pocket. So this is your 1/2 inch tab, so this corner to this corner. So we are going to angle or cut from the top corner, so the top left corner, to the bottom right corner. You could draw a line and then cut along the line. I'm going to just cut it in my score board, or my cutting board here, my trimmer, because this particular trimmer has this wonderful wire that runs in it. That's one of the reasons I love this trimmer. I have some things that I'm not so fond of about it, but the wire is one of the things I do like. So you want to line up the wire, or if you drew a line from top to bottom so it's right in your guide, or where you're going to cut. And then cutting from the bottom, holding everything secure, cut to the top. You have this, and you have this. All right, so now we don't need to miter these corners because nobody's going to see them. So we are going to adhere this, after I give it another burnish, to the inside front cover. So it is going to go right here, making sure that it's not overhanging the cover. So let's get our adhesive on the 1/2 inch tabs. Like so. And then I usually kind of work on one side, and if I'm happy, I work on the other. I'm just going to take a look to make sure nothing's hanging over. Okay, and then we want to burnish. Wipe up any glue, because you only want things to stick where you want them to stick. Okay, and then what's going to go in this pocket are 2 photo mats that measure 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. I am going to use my decorative punch and punch my corners. You could have made this just a booklet instead of making it 2 individual photo mats. That choice is yours, but I'm making 2 individual photo mats. And they just slide right in to your pocket once you make sure I believe I have a little bit of glue seepage down here. Yes, now it should. There we go. Just had to work it a little bit. So there's your 2 photo mats. Now we're going to go to the back cover and we're going to work on the waterfall that's eventually going to go in there. So for your waterfall, you need a base page that's going to measure 6 3/4. No, pardon me, let me do that again. You're going to need a base page that measures 7 by 6 1/4. Then you're going to need 4 pages, or 4 flaps, that are going to measure 6 1/4 by 5 1/2. Or I should have said it 5 1/2 by 6 1/4. And on the 4 flaps, you are going to score each one of those at 1/2 inch. So what I am going to do is I am going to burnish or round the corners on my 4 flaps. And now I'm going to burnish on those score lines. And I believe I did call this the base page, which I shouldn't have. So the 6 1/4 by 7 is the base of your waterfall. So what we want to do is we're going to use our scoreboard to help us keep everything straight, because that's what I like to do. And we are going to start by putting in the very top flap. Of our waterfall. So you got your adhesive. You're going to push it right up to the top, making sure that it's side to side coverage. We don't mitre our 1/2 inch tabs on a waterfall because they look a little funny when they're mitered and you lay down the next flap. Okay, so let's get that back in here. And now we're going to take our second waterfall, line it up so that it is right below the 1/2 inch tab, not over it, just right below. We're going to flip it out, flip out the tab, add our adhesive, and holding it in place, flipping that tab back under. Lifting it up, burnishing, wiping up any glue that might have not stayed where you wanted it to be. Okay, and now with our next flap, making sure that we're nice and square. We want that next waterfall flap right below the 1/2 inch tab. Flip it out, add adhesive, fold it back under, burnish, burnish, a little crooked there. And last one. So you want to make sure everything's nice and straight. It is. I find when you use a base for your waterfall, you don't get as frustrated because you manage to keep everything straight. And I've had people ask me, well, how do you know how big to make the base? Well, I'm going to show you in 1 second. So let's just burnish, or how I do it. So when I go to make a waterfall base, what I like to do is I, again, use my tools, and in this case I'm going to use my Scor Board. So I decided that I wanted my pages to be 5 inches deep or long. So I had to add a 1/2 inch to that, so that's 5 1/2. So what I did is basically I started cutting my waterfalls, my flaps, and I laid them on my Scor Board. So there's 5, and then I put the next tab, or at the very edge, and I just kept working out. So because I know they're a 1/2 inch bigger because of your tab, right? You're laying each one down up against the tab, so that means it's going to be a 1/2 inch lower than the one before. I just kept measuring out until I got to the length I wanted. And in this case, I wanted it to be 7 because my page is 8, and I wanted to have a 1/2 inch at the top of my waterfall and a 1/2 inch at the bottom of my waterfall. So there's your waterfall. We're not going to be putting this in yet because, of course, I need to decide on the pattern paper I'm going to decorate this book with. But you could add your closure. Now, in the walkthrough I showed you, I had decided to use the green and beige, I guess is what I call it, twine. This one, I believe I am going to be using the other ribbon, because that's what this is, that was available in that kit. Now, I'm not going to add it yet because I'm not 100% sure that this ribbon is going to go with whatever paper I'm going to finally choose to decorate this book with. And like I said in the walkthrough, if you don't like the bump that the cord makes when you put it on the back of this page, you do see it slightly on this, especially this bottom waterfall. What you could do is use this instead, because this makes the most beautiful. It ties so nicely. So we have now finished the construction of our album. Don't know why that happened, but we'll take a look at that. Maybe I have to fix it. And there is our album construction for the Simple Stories, Simple Vintage Great Escape walkthrough.